Today I want to show you a few longer, different low-light shots of the three current action cameras to give you a good impression of how the Insta360 Ace Pro 2, the DJI Action 5 Pro and the GoPro Hero 13 perform in low light. It's important for me to note that the latest firmware was used for all three cameras, which means that the final firmware was used on the Ace Pro 2 and the latest firmware, which enables a higher bitrate, was used on the Action 5 Pro. On all three cameras I set the bitrate setting to high. And actually I don't want to judge these shots in detail myself, but I would appreciate your feedback. I would just like to draw your attention to a few things. What is particularly difficult in low light is the correct reproduction of colors, especially if the light comes from artificial light sources and therefore different light colors are mixed. What you should also pay attention to are the highlights, that is the brightest part of the image. This could be the various lamps that can be seen in the shot or the sky if it's a little brighter. Sometimes these are overexposed or blurred, sometimes the highlights are protected a little better. What is also interesting is that the different cameras produce different lens flares. The lens flares of the Action 5 Pro in particular are relatively noticeable and look very unconventional. What the action cameras also struggle with is the stabilization in low light conditions. All three cameras only use electronic stabilization, and this requires very sharp images for good performance. And for an image to be sharp, the exposure time must not be too long. In other words, there is a conflict between a longer exposure, which would result in a brighter and possibly better image, or better image stabilization. At the end, I will show you a few shots with manual settings and with the log profile, because these shots here were all taken using the automatic mode and all in what the various manufacturers seem to consider the best settings for low light conditions. On the Ace Pro 2 there is the so-called pure video mode, which is called pure video plus when the frame rate is low. On the Action 5 Pro the recording mode for low light is called super night mode. On the GoPro you should shoot in 4K in low light conditions and not in 5.3K. And what's new on the Hero 13 is that you can set the noise reduction level yourself. In the standard settings, it's set to high. Apart from that, the Hero 13 does not have a dedicated low light mode. What many people often overlook is that even indoor shots in artificial light are actually low light shots. A small action camera can only deliver the best performance when there is plenty of daylight. In other words, a normal indoor shot in artificial light is already a challenge for this type of camera. And you can clearly see that the Hero 13 struggles to keep up with the other two cameras in all these shots. Of course, this is also due to the significantly smaller image sensor of the GoPro Hero 13. So no matter what you think of the three cameras here and what your preferences are, if shots in low light conditions are important to you, you should go for one of the other two cameras. And the darker it gets, the more significant the differences become. That's why it makes sense to only show shots from the Ace Pro 2 and the Action 5 Pro from now on. What you can't see so well on YouTube is the noise behavior. Due to the compression that occurs when the clips are processed on YouTube, you can no longer judge the image noise very well in some cases. That's why I would like to add that the dark areas in the image on the Action 5 Pro have significantly more image noise. You must trust me on this one. Regardless of which of these two cameras you are interested in or choose, I think they both perform incredibly well in low light for an action camera. Because one thing you shouldn't forget is that an action camera isn't really made for low light shots. But of course I understand that if you spend $400 on a camera, you want to be able to use it flexibly and in different situations. And as you can see, the GoPro Hero 13 simply has too many disadvantages in this context. Pay attention to the lens flares here again. Although the Ace Pro 2 also produces lens flares, these have a more natural appearance and do not produce rainbow-like colors. Many people are of the opinion that you can also achieve better results in low light using the log profile. For this reason, I would like to show you a few shots with the two log profiles as announced. I converted the log profile in post with the LUT provided by the manufacturers. I left the exposure settings on automatic for these shots. What benefits the Action 5 Pro in this context is that its log profile has 10 bits. This is not the case with the Ace Pro 2. It should also be added that the log profile is not normally particularly suitable for low light shots. Although a log profile can lead to a better dynamic range, it usually has disadvantages in low light. But I'm happy to be convinced otherwise in this test. And here you can see a few more shots in which I set the exposure settings manually. I set the shutter speed to 100 to enable an appropriate stabilization, and I set the ISO value manually to 1600. The shots can't be compared though, because Insta360 obviously brightens the image in camera, even if you set everything manually. For a darker image, you have to adjust the exposure value down. So what do you think of the difference between the Action 5 Pro and the Ace Pro 2? Write me your opinion in the comments. If you haven't seen my other two comparison videos between the Ace Pro 2 and the GoPro Hero 13 or the Ace Pro 2 and the Action 5 Pro, I can highly recommend these two videos for a much more complete comparison. There will of course be more videos on all three action cameras. So stay tuned, give me a like as feedback if you found this video interesting, and see you next time.